No man do they call me. My mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Hey everybody. It has been a long time since I have uploaded regularly on this channel. And besides gaming with my family, the 40k content has basically become less than a trickle. I wanted to thank everyone who has supported me through all of this. I know there are still people who are waiting, who are still hoping for more 40k content, and I will be forever grateful to have had the experience I've had running this channel. Um, the ups and downs have been truly incredible. I've created a lot of things that people have really enjoyed and that have been very meaningful to people. When I've done really good stuff, when I feel like I've been on my game, the content I put out was like something I thought was really special. And I feel very humble and grateful that I was able to experience something like that with people from all over the world. Unfortunately, this video is more or less the official end of the channel as a 40k channel. Basically, because of how things have been going with my job, I simply don't have the energy or inclination to create Warhammer 40k content. I've hinted at this before, and some of you might know, but I'm currently working as a therapist, providing services to low-income families. And this work has been very, very rewarding. I feel like I've been able to do some very good things, but it is very, very taxing, and it is difficult to hear about real-world suffering that is pretty tremendously difficult to hear about, and then write grim, dark, violent stories. It's just like, this isn't... My heart just isn't in it anymore. I can't quite bring myself to do it anymore. Now, that's not to say there won't be any new content ever. This will remain a gaming channel for myself and my family. We're going to get on, hang out, do goofy things, and people are welcome to watch our weekly streams. Right now, we're typically streaming at 8 p.m. on Mondays. That might change depending on things in the future, but that's what the schedule is right now. But I think my scripted content is largely going to be at an end. It's not impossible that I come up with a funny orc short story, or I might be able to do something simple occasionally if I feel inspired, but this is mostly the end. With things coming to an end, I do have some regrets about how this is ending and some of the circumstances of it. Because I would say that the thing I regret most is not having finished the Ogryn Returns. And there are a lot of people who also were really connected with growing the tribe, and they wanted to know how that was going to end, what was going to happen to Snodius. And I'm forever honored that there are still people out there who are holding on to hope that the Ogryn and the adventures of Snodius will continue or to be brought to some kind of conclusion. But it's just not going to happen, not without things in my life dramatically changing. But I do want to talk about both of those stories and talk about where they were going and what my plans were going to be for their conclusion. And hopefully that will give some kind of satisfaction or closure to people who are waiting on that. So I'll start with growing the tribe and where that was kind of going. Growing the tribe was an absolute blast to do. I think it was one of the most fun things I've ever done collaboratively as a creator. To build a story completely with my chat to make the story happen. You guys got to name all of the characters. You guys got to make all of the decisions. You guys brought the story to life. For a while, it was incredibly fun. But this was not a story I was planning on picking up. This was not one where it's like, oh, I can't, I'm not gonna, I could do this, but it just got away from me and I didn't do it. It became very apparent that the story just got way, way, way too unwieldy, and it was just going to get more and more and more complicated and hard to keep track of. By the end of the story, I had nigh on hundreds of characters, complete with their own personalities and story arcs and things people wanted to see. And it was just like I was being pulled in a million different directions, and trying to pull a narrative out of that was nigh on impossible. It just got to be too much. Um, but that's not even counting the fact that I was trying to combine the story of growing the tribe with the ongoing story I had with Core Imperi 5, which is a whole nother host of characters that I'd have to incorporate. It was just too much, and I basically reached a point where I couldn't keep track of it all, and the effort kind of collapsed. It was way, way too much. Um, but I can tell you where things were kind of going when I decided to call it quits. So with growing the tribe, I didn't actually have a specific end planned out. And that's just by the design of the game, because it was a role-playing game that chat did, and then I would write the story based on what chat did. So I didn't have a specific thing that I was going to do. Basically, if the game had continued, chat would have been the one to shape how everything was going to go down. Um, as you know, Snodius and his band of Orcoids were reaching a point of conflict with nearby Big Town. And there's also a mysterious base to the north of Snotopia, and we were building up to a fight with Big Town. So there would have been a fight. If Snodius had won that fight, which he probably would have, given that people were very creative and very good with problem solving. If he won, Snodius would now be on the radar of the planet at large. It would have been a large enough area that would have had a big enough impact that you'd be aware of it. Like a small town suddenly disappearing would people would take notice of. Things would escalate, but Snodius would also not be the only threat. Core Imperi 5 had a lot of different things they were dealing with. Gene stealers, chaos cultists, a suspiciously normal human being who was definitely not Trazen the Infinite wearing a mustache, and there were a dozen other factions that were all trying to create problems and make power plays, and the orcs would have been one problem among many. From there, it would have become a game of factions and kind of managing where you were and playing one side off the other. Until some conclusion would have been reached, whether that would be Snodius fleeing the planet, or if it was going to end with him dying, or if he was going to actually conquer the planet. It would have been up to chat how that exactly would have played out. Now, as far as the secret base to the north goes, in the backstory that I had planned, the reason that the orcs were on Core Imperi 5 to begin with was that there was a meteor strike that was investigated, and it took a while, and eventually the orc spore settled and grew into the first of Snodius. But the thing that hit was not just like a normal meteor. It was like I hadn't decided what it was going to be, but it was going to be like an alien artifact. It might have been a Necron thing. It might have been a Chaos object. It might have been some other weird Xenos artifact. But basically, the base there was run by an Inquisitor. It was not part of the planetary authority. Nobody on the planet knew that it had happened or what had happened. They kind of went around making sure records of this strike were kind of faded out, didn't really register, and they were like doing their own experiments on this thing. So the part that the secret base was going to be is they were kind of going to be a wild card, because they did not care about the well-being of this planet. The only thing they cared about was getting the information or technology or whatever it was they were trying to do from this secret thing that they had. So that was kind of the whole of where things were going with growing the tribe. That's everything that was in play, and it was just going to be kind of continuing to get bigger and huger and more complicated, and it was just too much for me to manage. It was way, way too much. As much as people really liked growing the tribe, it was not something that I regretted stopping. It just became apparent to me that this was going to fall apart and not be tenable. Now, Og the Ogryn was a bit of a different situation. I had basically, the idea I had laid out for what I wanted to do with the story, the main character of the story was going to be more about Lieutenant Carter than it was about Og. Og had finished his character arc in the first story. He's now a hero, and he wasn't really going to grow or develop or learn a whole lot more. Um, Things would happen to him, and he'd have challenges, but he was not going to be the main hero of the story. Carter was going to kind of go from being a junior officer that was way over his head, and he was going to become a valued veteran and competent commander through the events of all this. The reason that the Ogryn Returns stopped was because I was having trouble pulling all of the threads together to bring it all to a satisfying conclusion that didn't seem repetitive. Um, Basically, there were so many battles and so many things that had to happen to bring the story to a conclusion that I didn't know how to make it happen while maintaining the forward momentum of the story. I was worried that it was just going to be a story about going to this place and then doing this thing, and then I had to go to this place and then do this thing, and then fight the bad guy at the end, and that was kind of going to be it. I got stuck, and I thought I could figure out how to make it work, but I wasn't able to do it, and I lost momentum, and then it became too difficult to pick back up and try to finish. But I will tell you what I did have planned for that. When it comes to the Ogryn Returns, I was running out of steam for a while. Writing battles in a way where it felt engaging, and like what was happening was very clear, and the purpose of everything that was happening. Like, battles are a lot of stuff coming together because you have to incorporate themes. Characters are growing during battles. It is like the manifestation of, like, the point of a battle is like something is happening in the story with the characters. All of these things have to happen, and that just got to be more and more difficult as things went forward. And I got stuck trying to describe the battle in the main square in an interesting way, just so we didn't all get bogged down in boring details. But what was going to happen, what I had kind of the structure of the conflict was, with the help of the White Scars, they were going to be on motorcycles or jet bikes, flying through the trenches, running dudes over. In, awesome manner. And Og and his friends were going to be, help him as well. And they're going to fight their way towards the void craft that landed in the middle of the square. And so they're basically going to blast their way through it, reach the crew that was on board, and what they were going to discover was that Commissar Gallus, and that this was the ship that Og had been on, and Commissar Gallus was going to be there and meet up with them, and then that was going to be kind of the rest of the story was going to unfold, and we'd be able to see Gallus again. Gallus would then reunite with Og, and they would begin the search for the Tin King to eliminate him. Now, there was a lot of mystery and questions about who the Tin King was, and I can give you his backstory and how this was all going to kind of be resolved and what I had planned out. The Tin King was originally just going to be a menial. He was just a dude. He was a menial who at some point didn't meet his quota, or he got caught stealing rations, or he had committed some minor offense, and then he was slated for servitor conversion. However, what would happen is he was actually a latent psyker, and his psychic powers were brought to the forefront during the basically the brain surgery that occurred during servitor conversion. It kind of awakened his psychic powers, and because he was all plugged into the electronics and systems as a servitor, he was like designed to be interacting with these different electronic sort of programs and things. He would kind of basically become an electronic psyker. Like, he would interact with the machine spirits of various machines and things that were around him, and kind of get himself put in the various systems in the around Polis, and that was kind of how he infiltrated and built up his following. And he kind of gathered people who were like disaffected menials and was able to perfectly coordinate them because he could communicate with them in secret back channels that only he knew about, and could prevent people from like finding him out. So one of the major problems was that I wasn't sure how I was going to create a satisfying confrontation with the Tin King. My plan was for Og to be tempted. The Tin King, as they were journeying to find him, would like send messages to him, continue to send dreams. Og had already had one dream, and he would kind of prey on the fact that the Ogryn were second-class citizens. They were used as labor and battle fodder, and then he would try to tempt Og over to his side. Og would resist because it's just not in Og's character to succumb. He's too much of a good boy. And eventually there'd be a showdown where the Tin King would be destroyed. And ultimately I felt like it was too much like the first Og the Ogryn story, where they went down into the bowels of Molech to find a psychic thing, and then there was a final battle, and then Og would come out victorious again. It was just like I couldn't figure out a way to make all of this happen, make it different, and make it a satisfying end to the story, and I just lost the heart to kind of do it all. I will also mention another series briefly. I was going to do more with Deperium and the Return of De Emperor, for those of you that have been following that. This is about the orc who believed he was the emperor. The story's pretty funny if you ever pick it up. But that second story was kind of my most half-baked project. I did not have a plan of what to do with De Emperor and what he'd do if he returned or how it would work. I just started writing his return, and I was like, yeah, I'll like figure out what he's going to do. It's orcs. Orcs aren't hard to figure out. He'll just show up and do orc stuff, and it'll be funny. And I just never came up with a good idea that was very funny or interesting. It was a less popular series, and I haven't really gotten people being like, hey, when is this going to continue? So I've kind of let it go, but that was another thing that I kind of got stuck on. So I hope this gives my fans some closure. Now, this does not mean that Og or Snodius's stories, or even the Emperor's story, has to stop. I do give permission to anyone who would like to see these stories continue, write them on in their own way. As with all of my content, as long as you credit me with starting the story and encourage people to read the original stories, you are welcome to continue on your own and write your own conclusion to these different stories. Whether you want to take the ideas I put down here and like finish them, or if you want to take it in a different direction, that's going to be up to you. But I once again thank all of you for your time and energy, for all of you who stuck around for as long as you have. It's been a really, really long time, but I think it's time to officially call it an end. Again, I will never say completely never. It's possible that something could change in the future and I'll come back, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. There are things in my life that I'm going to be dealing with that I'm going to have just different priorities right now. But I will still be on here. I will still be streaming. I might probably post some goofy stuff and maybe do some Orc Discuss videos, but I'm going to abandon the Emperor, finding the Emperor storyline. I just don't think I'm going to be able to do any more long-form 40K narratives on here. It was fun while it lasted, but all things come to an end, and this is the end of this one. So thank you all so very much. Appreciate every last one of you for making this special. And for one last time, No Man out.